Monday, the 19th of May, 2014. This is Management 4720, Strategy and Policy. This is our first meeting. This video will be put up on YouTube for rebroadcast to anybody that needs to look through some stuff again. Recall that in our meetings, they're about every other week, and some weeks they're on a Wednesday, and some weeks they're on a Monday. I had to do a little juggling there because I have my management course, which all of you have taken, meets on the Wednesday nights also, and so there's a little juggling there. So be careful about that. As always, monitor Canvas, monitor the announcements daily. If anything happens, that's where I'll post any changes or anything like that. Feel free to send me questions via email on Canvas. Usually it's about administrative stuff. Basics, right? It's getting hot in here.
It is warm in here. Yeah.
This course has only a single exam at the end of the term, or about a week before the end of the exam. And it will come in part from the text. You may recall that one of the authors on the textbook is a person named Strickland, not anybody I know. So I'm not getting any kickbacks on that. Hopefully there are enough used copies of that book out. Mike, you got one in paperback, huh? That's even better. Hopefully you didn't have to pay full retail on that. Is that the international edition or something? They're almost always identical.
I hope so.
Not a problem.
Much cheaper.
For the textbook material, I've given you test banks on Canvas. I encourage you to work together, pool together, assign each question to 2 people and 1 person to check it and get it done in the next 5-6 weeks, and then it's all the time in the world to study. The other parts of this course, frankly, there are a couple of things still in development. That's why if you look at the VRSQ, Videos, Readings, and Study Questions, when you get down to the end of it, it goes from July 14th to August 4 with no assignments. That's because I'm still cooking stuff up. What I'm basically trying to do, I'm trying to make sure you've been exposed to traditional business strategy as it's presented in the textbook. And so part of your exam will involve just that material using the test bank questions, which come right from the test bank for that book. We can talk about those in class anytime you want to, but I will try hard not to give you an answer. Okay. The other parts of this course that to me are what I want to make sure I cover. One is, you had it on the problem assigned for tonight, it takes economics, managerial economics, microeconomics, and it extends it a little further in, so how do we use this? Not just concepts, but how would we use this? And that's part of what we'll be doing tonight on one of those problems. You can expect one of those problems on the exam. That exam will be a long exam. The other thing that is not a required part of this program that I think it should be is macroeconomics. And so you're going to have a number of videos on macroeconomics to watch, and I'll be glad to go over any of that here in class. If you're watching stuff, reading stuff, working on stuff at home, and you say, man, this doesn't make any sense, send me an email. And even if I don't respond in the sense of here's the answer, at least I can make a note and say, well, that's something we need to talk about in the classroom. And that's what we'll use the classroom for. So, textbook strategy, managerial economics applied, macroeconomics, and then I've built, so far 2, working on 2 more cases that are going to make you go through the analysis of a business, almost from the ground up. You remember in management we did break-even problems. You had an assisted living facility with 50 beds and only 46 of them would be full, and your costs are this, and how much did you have to charge for a bed? That kind of break-even analysis is kind of a takeoff point. And then from that, if you had this business, what would be your strategic considerations? And hopefully, based on some of your reading and some of the discussions we'll have, you'll find yourself, I hope, this would be my fondest dream, you'll find yourself going around to businesses around town, sitting down inside of them and starting to analyze them. And starting to think about, how big is this? Wonder what rental rates are like for this kind of property, retail property. What's the seating capacity in this restaurant? Okay, I'm going to count the seats. They can seat 40 people. They're open 5 days a week. The average meal takes 2 hours. The average person pays $25 for a meal. How many customers do they have to have during the course of the week to break even? And I want you to start looking at businesses in that regard. And in fact, I've got a couple of other ideas I'm cooking on. I may ask you to go out and look at a couple of businesses. Spend a little time sitting in there watching what happens. And then we'll talk about, what do you think is going on What do you think of the things they need to be worried about? What do you think of the smart things they could be doing to plan for the next 5, 6, 8 years? Okay? You come out of here with a grasp of that and the ability to sit down and talk about that kind of stuff, I'm real happy. Now, in some of these cases, I will ask you questions in specific areas. There may be a legal consideration. I might say, well, here's a business such and such and such and such. What do you suppose is going on with, do you suppose that there's a problem in this business or a potential problem of wage theft? What is wage theft? Familiar with that? Josh?
Basically, not doing your job, essentially having the stealing money from the company by not doing the work that you're supposed to perform.
Turn it just around. You're thinking about the employee stealing by not doing the work.
Having a manager pay employees to
Who do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good term for wage theft, but it's not the one we usually use. That's that satisficing employee who's doing just barely enough to get by. I'm turning it around from the other side. This is a big deal in the literature these days and in the news. It's employers who are working employees overtime and not paying for it, or working them hours for which they're not paid.
There's a whole lawyer that does an ad for that.
Yeah, it's huge. And the state and the federal government, where they can investigate it, are doing so, but they're tremendously understaffed. Last number I saw, your chances are, I think it was the restaurant industry, your chances are 1 in 12,000 that they're going to audit your business and see if you've been not paying your employees. But with that kind of low probability,
That's right.
you'll be working overtime or no time. How much do you want to work? You know. So, is wage theft a possibility? And if so, what does the law say about compensating employees? What is overtime? And I might ask you to investigate down that avenue based on your HR courses that you may have had. I'm going to locate some financial statements and say, here's a set of financial statements on this company. What do you think? How's it look? I had a student last week write me and say, would you be willing to sit down with my husband and I and look at the financial statements of a daycare center that we're considering buying? Boy, I might just change some names and a few numbers and give that to you and say, what do you think? Because presumably you've had the finance course, you know how to read financial statements, run some ratio analysis, and ratio analysis does what? All that does is pop questions up. Wow, their accounts receivable, they got $20,000 in accounts receivable and it's all 8 months old or older. Well, that ought to send the flags up and the sirens screaming because somebody's not collecting their money. So I would expect you to be able to do the financial analysis. Lots of things with people, problem employees. Interesting to me. My wife went to a conference this weekend in Orlando with a bunch of scientist types. She's one of those. And they run laboratories, doing all kind of testing and stuff. And guess what the big gripe was from everybody she talked to? And these are mostly supervisors. What was the big gripe?
Employees.
What kind of employees? Lazy is one criteria. When descriptor.
Underqualified?
Not sure on that.
Okay.
Unmotivated?
Okay, pretty close. What age group do you suppose I'm talking about?
18 to 25.
18 to 35, actually. Employees with no sense of what was appropriate and what was, de rigueur, expected. One of the ladies was saying, we came here to this conference with 3 people from my office to put on a display and do a talk. I gave 2 employees these checklists of all the stuff we're supposed to bring and told them to make sure we had it all. We got in last night, opened it all up, and half of it's missing. What do you do with people like that? Got an answer, anybody?
Retrain and retrain.
Anybody else?
You have to decide if it's skill or will, if they need to be retrained or if there's not a will to do it, is what a lot of our retail people call it.
I like the term skill or will.
Yeah.
Either they don't know how or they didn't
Or they
get
don't
it.
want to, right. And you have to figure out if it's training and the manager's not training correctly, or if it's the will and no matter what we...
I think you're absolutely right. We got to look for that. But the first thought that came to my mind, what did you tell them exactly?
Well,
Make sure.
How much did they understand of what you think you told them? Tell me what you told them. And let me see if I can find a way to not understand it. Because if there's a way to not understand it, what do we know? I'm good at it, yeah. I won't understand anything that's going to make me work. Josh?
Well, I'm just, I sort of understand where you're coming from, but based on that particular example, if you bring what's on the list, if they don't have what's on the list, You know, I mean, that's kind of like pass or fail.
Well,
I mean,
let me give you an example. There's two of you. I give you each the list, and I say, make sure this stuff's in the boxes.
gotcha.
What happened?
And so the other person did it.
Each one thinks the other person did it. Nobody had the good conscience, or what I call the common sense, to go back and check it. So we want to be looking for little things like that, because that's what drives policies in the company. We set the policies up to prevent screw-ups. What was the other one? It'll come to me in a minute, but you know, the first day you're hired and you go through an orientation in a new company, what's one of the first things you got to do? What's that book they give you?
The policies and
Policies and procedures of the company. And you, unless you're a damn fool, you better sit down and read that very, very, very carefully.
A lot of people don't.
Because that's the way we can hang you if we want to. That's the way you can hang yourself out of ignorance, okay? That's the way you can make a reputation for yourself, by knowing what's going on. But we write those policies to try to preclude this same problem coming up again and again and again and again and again. So we'll get down into some of the nitty-gritty here and there, and I'm going to hope you will bring some examples and cases from where you've worked. Teresa, I know you've got a ton of them. So we'll look at it from a policy point, we'll look at it from a strategy point, we'll look at it through different windows, HR, finance, maybe some accounting, certainly some financial calculations and break-even. Definitely from some marketing. How much did you learn about marketing so far? If I told you, here's my idea for a new restaurant in Gainesville, how long would it take you to build me a marketing plan, and after that we'll build a business plan, but just the marketing side of it? How much is involved in a marketing plan?
Research, to figure out what people you want.
Is there a procedural way to go through a marketing plan? Do you know a format for one? I'm going to give you a 7-step quickie marketing plan. And you can embellish and elaborate on that all you want. But we'll be talking about marketing aspects too. Not just marketing for the next 60 days or 6 months with my budget. What's your marketing plan for the next 3 years? What things are going on, and how are you going to gradually adapt? One of the things I hope you'll find, I found, with a lot of businesses that start up new, they start up with this idea: this is what I'm going to do. And in 6 months to maybe 2 years tops, they may be doing a little bit of that, but they're doing a whole bunch of other stuff, and maybe 90% of it's other stuff, because it evolves based on your interaction with the customers, your opportunities for this, and somebody comes in with a good deal and we could partner and do that, and next thing you know, you're doing a whole different thing. So how do you plan strategy in a world that's constantly changing? I've had more than one CEO tell me, you can't build strategy. There's too many things changing too quickly out there. I agree, a lot of things are changing, and they're changing quickly. A lot of times, if you spend a whole lot of time in that strategy, sometimes it's going to be out the window. But if you don't sit down once in a while, look 3 and 5 and 10 years down the road, you're a damn fool. And you and I, that should be true for us in terms of our career as well. So that's kind of where we're going. I need you to take it on yourself to watch those videos and let me know. Come to class. I'll try to pick them up when they're assigned. Let's see here. There was some macro assigned for this week. When we come back in 2 weeks, I guess that'll be June the 2nd, we'll be talking about classical economics and Keynesian economics. And if you've got questions on that, let me know. For the next week, May 26th, there are some questions on the VRSQ. You might want to take a close look at those. And if you have any kind of issues along the way, let me know.
So our next meeting in class will be June 2nd?
I think so. It'll be that week. And since that's probably a Monday, it may be on the Wednesday that week, I'm not sure. I did not bring the,
That's what you said, yeah, you said the 4th was a Wednesday.
4th is a Wednesday.
it is scheduled for the 4th?
Yeah.
What room is it scheduled in?
You said B12.
B12.
Yeah.
Wednesdays when we meet, we'll be over in B12, same layout.
And the next one you said to be the Monday.
The next one is,
16th.
yeah,
It's the 16th.
okay, I'll take a look at that and be sure it's updated.
Is that in the announcements? Or
That's what's
It's on the
on
course
Okay.
schedule.
I found that on this one, but I didn't find the problem.
Yeah.
So between the both of us, honey, we have a full day. We have a full
Let's be
line.
clear, if you go to Canvas and you hit their little tab called syllabus, it's all screwed up.
Yeah.
If you hit their tab called calendar, it's all screwed up.
Yeah.
I don't know why Canvas is programmed to want to do all that stuff, but it does it wrong. So ignore it. Go to the course schedule and follow that. And if you find questions or blanks or anything, let me know. And I'll republish that regularly whenever I find anything that
That's
needs
why I missed
fixing.
the problem one.
Okay, what else do we want to do? There, just in passing, we're not going to be using it yet. We may not use it until late in the term, if at all. Strickland's notations on microeconomics. I use some little Greek letters and calculations and stuff, and this is a kind of a summary, mostly for elasticities, cross elasticities, income elasticity. Sound familiar?
Yeah, a
Right.
little bit. Okay, yeah, my sentiments exactly.
What was that?
You scream.
Okay, where do I go to drop this class?
Yeah, I emailed, I texted me, said, yikes, all I'm getting is
We'll do some of that.
economics.
I've got case number 1 here that I printed. I don't recall whether I put it up on a canvas yet. It's on H&H fishing lures.
Yeah, I've got that printed.
You'll notice that one of the questions in there says if the yield curve in the United States at this time was upward sloping. Well, what the hell? What's a yield curve? If you're not sure, go find out. Okay. And then the question says if a conservative, austerity-minded party controlled the House. What's an austerity-minded political party?
Fiscally responsible.
In their eyes, they consider them fiscally responsible.
Not big spenders.
People who think we're so far in debt we need to cut government spending a whole lot right now. The problem with that is it would trash the economy. So we want to be talking about those things. And you know me, I teach economics, and so while there's several windows on strategy we'll look through, one of them that I'm really gung-ho about is what is the economic environment? And how is that economic environment driven by the political environment? We need to be aware of that. So, that's kind of where we're going. Comments, questions, anybody so far? Okay. Do you remember what consumer surplus is? One sentence, can you tell me?
Money you could have had.
Money you could have had, you the seller, if what? If what? No?
You would have
Good
charged more.
quantity produced.
No?
That's the total amount of money the customers would have been willing to pay for the total amount of volume sold.
Would have.
Right.
It's the money people were willing to spend when they came into your store. But when they walked out, they didn't spend it. Now, they did buy stuff. So what are we talking about? We're talking about if you go into the store and you're going to buy a $200 lawnmower, and it's on sale for $100 and you buy it and go home. For you, that's a good deal. You got $200 worth of lawnmower for $100. For the owner of that business, that's called stupid. Because you don't know which customers they are, because everybody, you charge them all the same price, and we're going to see how foolish that can be. But if you can identify those people who were willing to sell more, what could you have done with that fella? If you knew when he came in the door, the sign went off, the little hidden sign, you saw it, $200 sucker here, what can you do to get that extra $100?
Sold an edge or two,
Damn right. An edger, what else?
fertilizer.
Fertilizer, extra blades for the mower,
Warranty.
filters for a change. Got to have a warranty. You don't want to get out in the middle of the summer and have this thing break down and grass grow up this tall, right? And by the time you get all this stuff too, by the way, you probably don't need a trailer to pull it in, okay? So let me show you my trailers. And then by the time you tell me, well, that's more trailer than I can pull, well, let me show you my SUVs. Right? And we're looking to see how much you're willing to spend. And so a little bit of what we're going to do here is going to be a little bit on sales technique too. Okay? So consumer surplus, how do we get them to pay more than they did? Graphically, and in economics, everything is graphically. When we have a demand curve, are all demand curves downward sloping? Pretty much, okay, for practical purposes. If you're a really small company in a great big industry, it's possible that you can sell everything you want for the same price because you sell to so few customers out of the whole market. And you may recall in micro we call that perfect competition. You had a horizontal demand curve. But that's more of a theoretical extreme. We generally know that if you reduce the price that you're charging, you will sell more of your product. But let's be careful on terminology. If the price is 10 and I sell 80 units, I reduce the price to 7 and I sell 110 units, okay? When I Trick question. When I reduced that price, did I increase the demand? No? What did I do?
Increase the quantity demanded.
Perfect. I increased the quantity demanded. Okay? Because imagine somebody writing this. When the price of gold falls, the demand for gold increases, raising the price of gold. Raising. Read that carefully. When the price of gold falls, the demand for gold increases. And when the demand for gold increases, it brings the price up.
Fluctuating market.
The demand isn't going up.
The demand doesn't change. When the price changes, nothing happens to the demand. You just told me that. The quantity demanded changed. I've seen this in newspapers before, including one local newspaper, whose name will remain unnamed. Initials are the Gainesville Sun. Okay? What's wrong here? This isn't demand. This is supposed to be quantity demanded of gold. And this is a nonsense circular statement. When the price of gold falls and the price of gold goes up. Come on. So we want to be careful about those things in our terminology and in our thinking as we're taking apart anything. So we're up here with a $10 price. We sell 80 units. How much money did we make?
$800.
$800. What do we call that in economics? Price times quantity.
Total revenue.
Total revenue. In this case, it's $10 and 80 units, 800. That is the area of that rectangle. You see that? It's 80 units wide and it's 10 units high. Not real fancy math. But what is the consumer surplus here? It's recognizing that, let's say this was a number of different customers, there were some customers right up here on the demand curve who were willing to pay, oh, let's call this number 12, who were willing to pay 12 bucks a piece for a couple of these things. And there's a few others out there who were willing to pay $11.90 to buy one or two of them. And then there's other people that were willing to pay a lower and lower and lower price. But we, in our wisdom, said, well, I'm going to charge all of y'all $10. And as a result, those few people that were willing to pay more money, they got the consumer surplus. They walked out thinking they got a good deal, and they did for them. But for you, the seller, it means that this triangle, the area under the demand curve and above the price, this triangle represents the consumer surplus, or the money you lost because you, A, didn't understand what you were doing, and B, weren't intelligent enough to figure out a way to get at least some of it. That's consumer surplus. That's where we're going, okay? You think that happens in all businesses? Can you think of a business where that wouldn't happen?
That wouldn't have consumer surplus.
That you would capture all of the consumer surplus. That you, the seller, the owner.
Those used cars.
Used cars. They do a much better job of that, of getting that. We don't expect to get it all. But we expect to get some of it. Hell, if it's big enough, we can get enough Strickland to buy a new boat. Okay? Well, now, how is it that the used car salesman is able to get more consumer surplus?
There's such a high markup.
Qualified.
That's their training.
It's because every one of us that goes on that lot is going to pay a different price. And his or her game is to find out what's the maximum price I can get you to pay. Okay? And so if you're out there, if there's a car out there and you went out there dressed as a college student, okay, flip-flops, t-shirt, ball hat on backwards and cooling around looking at the car, and then I go out there in a coat and tie, are we going to get the same price? Who's going to get the cheaper price?
You in a suit.
You think? His first thought, I think, is going to be, the guy with the nice clothes on has more money. I bet I can get him to pay more. And so he's going to try to, I don't know which one of us is going to get the better price coming out of it. Okay? But I know that he's going to be treating us differently as he pushes us to find our consumer surplus. Josh?
I mean, wouldn't that sort of depend on whether he thought he would be able to get repeat business from you?
I would
They
tell
should,
you
but they
that
don't.
too often in the used car business and most other negotiated sales on a consumer basis, not a business basis, repeat sales is not a strong factor
I think the
in
car,
their behavior.
I think the car business is trying to get to that.
They would
But
love to get to that.
But they have still not. I just watched my parents buy one, and it was hilarious. I went with them at the end, and it was
If you know
funny,
what's
'cause I
going
just
on,
watched this video.
It's better than a
Yeah,
sitcom.
yeah,
you
and
know?
and the salesman I wanted to toss out of the car when we were riding, he just was. I could
That's
see
a,
it.
I've got to erase this because I don't have enough room and I can't talk without a picture, but we'll come back to it. What's the general rule about treating customers bad? Ever heard that? It's called lifelong value of a customer.
If you treat one person bad, they usually go back and tell like 10 people,
Do they tell 10
or 5 people or something.
or 2 or 10?
Millions.
Yeah,
They go and tell everybody
That
how
would be
bad it
internet.
they
is.
Twitter it.
Do you talk to people about getting treated poorly by a business?
But I also do
Sure.
the same thing about when I get treated great.
Not
Do you?
everybody
Do you
does.
tell as many people?
Not as many.
No,
No, because we
Unless
expect
that
to be
comes
treated
up.
good.
right.
My rule of thumb, okay, and I'm very conservative in what I'm saying right now. One unhappy customer tells 3 people. Does he tell them the truth?
Probably
Maybe,
not.
maybe not.
Why
Tells
not?
them their perspective on it.
Right.
It might be exaggerated, but
Is exactly.
Why would it be exaggerated?
Because he's angry.
He's angry,
He didn't get what he wanted.
or
so-
he just likes to
Complain.
be the focus of attention and entertain people. You remember the disc personality? What kind of person likes to talk in front of people, entertain? Eyes, okay? If he's an eye person, he's not bound by the truth. He's going to make it a great story. Okay? So if this person is telling stories about how bad he was treated, I think implicit in there is at least 10 and probably 30% worth of exaggeration. Sometimes 200%. But that means each of these 3, having heard it, exaggerated, then find value in telling it to 2 more people each. Because, it's entertaining. It's fun to gossip and go on about stuff. And what do they get? What kind of story do they get? It's even more exaggerated.
Right, right.
It,
It's still.
it started out with they were rude in the way they talked to me. Well, by now they were shoving me
Yelling.
around the parking lot. 2 of them were holding me, and then each one of them, because after a beer or 2, there's nothing else to talk about. So they tell the same story with even more exaggeration. And if this is a conservative, if this is true, this means for every 1 bad customer experience that happens in your business, there's 16 lost customers. Okay? How much would that cost you?
And like you said, now with the internet, I feel like that
Oh,
is
I'm
a
not
lot.
done.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah. I was gonna say,
You're right.
I don't post on there, but the people that do,
We're talking about Angie's List?
or just any
Or
that
yellow
are,
bird.
yeah, that are
How many
upset
people
about
do you know on Facebook from the Gainesville area?
Yeah.
565.
565.
I have like
Hey,
10
you got
Facebook for now.
I bet I've got
This is
150
family.
of them just from this area.
I am on
Most of
Kansas,
them are-
just to clarify.
So
All right.
here's how this
Stop
plays out,
bragging.
though. You get treated bad by a business. You go home and you say, "Gee, let's make it a dry cleaners." Okay? I take my dry cleaner into this dry cleaners every week. I spend $40 a week between me and my wife on our dry cleaning. Okay? And I do that, I would say 40 weeks a year. Because I got a nice image to keep up,
Yeah,
or whatever.
right, yeah.
She's got all these expensive damn clothes. So I spend $1,600 a week at that business per year, right? And I write the business, say, this money is never coming through your front door again. And I'm going to tell the 150 people I know in Gainesville about my experience with your business. And I'm going to ask them to let you know that they heard about it and that they won't be coming in either. Okay? I'm sending them your email address. How's that? And so if you lose 100 more customers by the time I tell my friends and some of them tell their friends, how much is that going to cost you next year in the way of foregone revenues?
Yeah.
That's too many zeros, right? Now, you treated me really bad. I'm going to do my very best to make it cost you $160,000 in sales next year. What would you say if you were that business owner?
I'm going to fix the issue you
Feed
have.
dry-
What can I do to
feed dry
earn your?
for life.
Yeah.
You get free dry cleaning for a month.
Yeah.
Knife.
Many of you, I think most of you know John Spence, my friend John, the big speaker, entertainer, consultant.
Yeah,
Once or twice.
the one, I think.
He's from around here.
Yeah, okay.
John had this experience at a dry cleaner. He would go in the morning to a bagel shop next door, eat breakfast, drop off his dry cleaning, and drop off his laundry at a laundry. And he went into the dry cleaner one day, ready to fly out the next morning. He's gone all the time. And they said, well, we don't have your stuff. It won't be until tomorrow. He said, and tomorrow's no good. I got to fly out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, sorry, we can't do anything about it. He said, you better do something about it. This is my living. I'm sorry. Didn't really care. So he went back and wrote him this letter. And then took a copy of that letter to the bagel shop owner and the laundry owner and said, I love you very much, but I'll never be back in your business because I'm going to find another place where I can kill all 3 birds with 1 stone, dropping off my laundry, getting my breakfast, and my dry cleaning. Have a nice day. What kind of an impact would that have?
You know, it wouldn't have got that far with my dry cleaner, but.
My point is this, the cost of making a customer happy is minuscule compared to the damage they can and will, if they can, do. Okay? So, this goes back, for me, when I came to Gainesville, I don't want to think about how many years ago that was. I worked at Publix on 34th Street. My first day at Publix, the assistant manager trained me how to bag groceries and stuff. He said, let me tell you 2 rules for this store. He says, when you get out of your car out there and you come in here to go to work, when you get out of your car, you will have your tie on, your apron on, and you will walk down that parking lot like you're here for business. From the moment you get out of that car until the moment you get back in that car, you represent this company. Yes, sir. He says, next thing, when you're dealing with customers, if there is an unhappy customer, unhappy for any reason, if you can't find me or one of the other managers, you do anything it takes to make them happy. If you drop a jug of milk, don't worry about it. Run back in, get them another one, no charge, be as nice as you can. Anything else. That to me is an example of what company policies are all about. It's policies that preclude how many other things that could go on.
It can be even before JCPenney's young kid was coming in the parking lot and he cut a woman off and like cussed her out in the parking lot. Scott, the store manager, fired him on the spot.
Absolutely.
Fired him on the spot. He wasn't even in the door. He wasn't even in the door. He goes, but I wasn't in the store. He goes, but you represent. You had a JCPenney's tag on, your name tag on. He fired him on the spot. They had to escort him out the building because it was ugly, but they fired him on the
I
spot.
don't want it.
I learned that lesson when I used to play piano for a living. Somebody cut me off in traffic and I might have flung them the bird or been rude. I got to go play my show and they were sitting in the front row.
That's a good story.
That lesson.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about Publix too. To this day, they still hold that policy. and
Absolutely.
I will pay whatever money they want me to have that customer service and that satisfaction versus going to some other places. For example, Walmart. I don't care if they're
Elaborate.
cheaper.
Many years ago at Santa Fe, one of the courses we taught in the 2-year business curriculum was retailing.
Yeah. Years ago.
I was teaching that course and I asked each student to create some kind of a study by going around to whatever businesses around town, any aspect of their retailing operation. One of my students, kind of a brassy guy, he went to 5 different grocery stores. And his plan was he would get to the grocery store about 5:30 in the evening when it's busy as hops. He would go back in the back and get the biggest jar of grape jelly or strawberry jelly he could find and get up in the quick checkout line. And just as he got to the conveyor belt, he'd drop it on the floor so it broke. Did that intentionally, but made it look like an accident. And then he would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and then he would gauge how everybody reacted. Now, I couldn't do that. I'm not that brassy. But it was a wonderful explanation and story. And I said, well, what was the response? And back then we had several other grocery stores. We had Food Lion, Pantry Pride,
Yeah,
Winn-Dixie,
Pantry Pride.
Publix.
Hitchcock.
It was just, and Hitchcock's.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was Pantry Pride or Food Lion. He says, when that happened, and everybody looked up and saw him, he said, I thought they were going to grab me and escort me out and say, get out of here, don't come back. He says, a lot of the others were like really surly, but yeah, we'll clean it
Oh,
up.
yeah.
He said, Publix? He said, they gave me 2 free jars. They said, don't worry about it, it happens all the time. Here you go. He's sold on Publix for now.
Yeah, me too.
So the other part of that is, in these moments of extreme pressure is the best time to make the best customers. Overreact. And they'll be bringing their friends back to see you all the time. How do you institute that attitude and that policy in a company and make people believe in it.
And train it.
How do you do it?
It's gotta be continuous training, and you have to emphasize that your customer value is top priority. You can't have revenue without customers.
You've got to re-emphasize that all the time, but I'm going to leave you with this thought, and we'll get off of the retailing for a minute. To me, it's leadership. And leadership occurs one person to one person at a time with eye-to-eye contact. Okay? And so if you're the manager, you need to be talking to your people in small groups, face-to-face, one-on-one. You need to be going around that business and being seen, chatting with them, little minor pat on the back, what we call that, micro-affirmations. Remember that term? That's how you build that attitude. You don't build it by making it a policy, teaching a class, and going in your office. Doesn't happen. So much for that one.